Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today we're going to take 10 minutes to paint better watercolor paintings. Now, I want to give you basically 3 advice that I think you'll find useful. I'm not going to go into the do it this way or do it that way, but let's get started with the first one, and that is more water, more time. This is the biggest thing that helped me from way in the beginning of my watercolor journey around 2015 or so. When you use more water, it gives you more time to do whatever you want, just about anything. And what you're seeing me doing right now is using quite wet washes where I'm just pre-wetting the paper, giving myself that time to add to it more and more. If I decide to go darker, that's great. I can go darker, wet and wet, and slowly and gradually build up the values and make them darker. But the thing is, once I put in this clean water you just see me doing here, I can take a couple of moments, I can look at the thing, I can mix the darker value that I need, as you see me doing now, and I'm going to start adding more and more darker value to it. The number one issue I see many beginners have is, or at least one of the top 3 is, they mix a very small amount and it's very thick. There's nothing wrong with thick paint, but when you use that paint and you expect it to actually work and to lead to the desired result, and you end up with such a patchy wash and you start losing the details because you can't see it, because the everything is very patchy and uneven. And I love, by the way, paintings that use watercolor very organically and have that unevenness to them. But what happens is, you as the artist, if you expect a smooth wash and you fail to achieve it time and time again, and you don't know what leads to that failure, and you're getting frustrated, you're starting to lose the details. You don't know where everything is, and you can't navigate around a painting, and that leads to a lot of issues. So what you see me doing here is, for the most part, I started very light, and I started establishing the values very, very light. And some of it is because I want to, because something is actually light, but often I'll use water first to allow that smooth transition you saw me beginning with, and then I have the option to go darker. And speaking of going darker, if you look at what's going on the screen, this is the next one for you. It's okay to paint the darks first. So while I have started with some lights here, I am now completely free to just get on with the darks, and I can paint the black, the darkest darks in this scene, before I even start working on other things. That is perfectly okay. The whole light to dark thing, it's a result of the advantages of using a lot of water and just historically speaking how people would paint. But you don't have to work this way. You can work very close to how you would work with oil painting, where you map out the darkest darks, where you map out the shadows. It can look fantastic, and it can look really, really good if you place in those darkest darks. It does a couple of things. First, it allows you to see what the darkest dark looks like, and then you have a framework for what's in the middle. So you have the lightest light, which is paper white, and you have the darkest dark, and you can fill in the blanks of what's in the middle. That's the first big advantage of this. The second one is navigation around the painting. Once you place those darks, it's easier to find your way around what you're painting. It's easier to know, okay, where is this going? Where is this shape going? And because navigation, that's something not talked enough about, and I have barely talked about it so far, but sometimes it is a challenge to figure out where you are. Not so much in these kinds of portraits, but if you're painting a landscape, if you're painting a big view with lots of small details, lots of small textures, lots of rocks, lots of different areas that are filled with repetitive kind of organic shapes, it's very hard to navigate around it. And if you allow yourself to place in the darks, if you're interested in that, you might just find it's easier to move around the painting more freely. Now, the good thing is, these 2 first tips I just provided are always useful for any case, and they work well together. They're pretty evergreen. You can use them for just about any painting. You can't go too wrong, but they also work really well together, because if you start very light, like you're seeing me doing right now, you're able to better control the edge, get a smooth edge, have more time to adjust things and make them look the way you want them to. But then you also have the door open to start adding some darks. And you will see me in a couple of moments really, really darkening this section in particular. And I think just giving yourself the permission to paint whatever value you want and jump between the values you see is huge. Now you see me starting to darken this. Again, wet and wet. And I'm using, the technique to the best of my abilities to gradually push this to be darker and darker and get it to the final value. Sometimes you just feel like doing that. Now, speaking of getting to the final value and painting the darks, let me get to my last advice, and then you want to stay for a few more moments because I'm going to provide you with a bonus tip. The third one is contrast is the key to interest and joy in your paintings. Contrast, difference, variety, changes is the key to the interest in your painting. What I mean by that is when you have both the light values and the dark values, like you see here, the dark values are beginning to develop, right? When you have the statue's light area and then the background that I'm adding right now that is darker, these are contrasts in value, right? When you have a gray or a cool color and right next to it a warm color like the red that I'm going to add to the background in just 1 second, these contrasts are what creates the joy and the interest in the painting. And if a painting has no contrast at all in none of the categories, it could be a bit maybe dull and boring. It could just be interpreted as that, or it could be interpreted as maybe an abstract, but you're not sure what to take of it because even great abstract art utilizes contrasts, right? Now, when you look at someone like August Sandstrom, who I featured here on this channel, he doesn't use a lot of colors and it's not really colorful paintings, but there's a lot of contrast in value. There are lights and darks. It's mostly gray, but there are lights and darks. Same with Wendy Arton. She paints mostly monochromatically. Maybe with here I'm mixing quite a bit of a dark value, and I needed a lot of it. She's using, both. She could use a burnt sienna or like a neutral tint or something like a gray or a sienna or a brown, whatever. But she uses only that, right? Even when you look at someone like Joseph Zbukvic, mostly gray, but then from that gray, he reaches into different colors that will add interest, enhance the focal point, and all of that good stuff. So there is contrast, whether it's the whole thing, like contrast in edges, contrast in shapes, contrast in colors, contrast in values, or it's just a contrast in one element only, and you can actually create a beautiful contrast with just colors, and not have that major of a difference in value, which is quite interesting. Maybe if you've been watching me for a while, that's not something you've seen a lot of, because I don't do that a lot, but sometimes I do enjoy having the color be the source of contrast rather than the value, rather than how dark or light something is. It can be great fun to differentiate between shapes based on color, actually, especially if the temperatures are a little different, so you get a variety there with cools and warms. Now, this brings me on to my final advice. And this is something a lot of people struggle with, a lot of people overthink, and also don't give enough thought to, simultaneously, funny enough. And that is, the painting is done whenever you decide it is done. So it's entirely your decision. There are a lot of ways to go about it. There are a lot of questions you can ask yourself, but at the end of the day, you can call it done. And if you look at a lot of paintings by artists you admire, they could have called it done 10 minutes before they actually called it done. They could have gone 10 more minutes and added more details. It's not so much in the exact accurate point, but rather in knowing what you're doing, in being able to execute upon your vision. If you know what the vision is you're trying to relay to the viewer, it's not really that difficult of a question to know. Okay, will adding something to this painting enhance it, or am I just taking away from it? Will adding something destroy it, or will it create more interest, right? These are questions you can ask yourself. You'll find an answer. And if you're uncertain, of course, you can just leave it for a day, come back tomorrow, see what it looks like. Do you like it? Or do you feel like something is missing? You'll know. If you'll allow yourself just to use your own intuition, not necessarily reach out to other people to ask, because they won't know as well as you do. So I hope that helps. I hope these 3 tips I provided were useful. If they were, and if you want to support my work two things for you. One, if you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, check out my Patreon. Just, $1 a month makes a huge, huge difference. So be sure to check it out. And I will post, if I haven't already, an exclusive process there. Something amazing, something sweet. You'll love it. Second, if you still haven't gotten my watercolor courses, either the frustration-free watercolor course or the watercolor realism course, I'm going to put a link in the description box below. Make this the day you solve your watercolor issues. Check these out. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next vid. Take care.